Welcome to the Workplace Therapy Podcast by Unity & Company. I'm your host, Scott Arrieta. I'm the CEO of Unity & Company. And on this show, we explore the human side of work, the dynamics, the challenges, and the opportunities that shape how we lead, how we collaborate, and how we thrive together. And today I'm so excited to welcome a very special guest, Lori Woodley Langendorff. Lori is a thought leader, an author, and a speaker who has spent her career helping people and organizations to build stronger connections through social emotional literacy. She's the co-founder and chief visionary officer of All It Takes, which is a nonprofit that she launched with her daughter, actress and producer Shailene Woodley. And she continues to grow alongside her son, Tanner. Lori's newest book, SEL Muscle Mastery, is a practical guide for developing emotional resilience and meaningful connections, not just in schools and communities, but in workplaces where collaboration, adaptability, and accountability are more important than ever. She has a gift for making emotional intelligence accessible and actionable, helping leaders and teams create healthier environments that support both people and performance. Lori, we are so fortunate to have you on the show, and welcome.
Thank you, Scott. I'm so grateful to be here, and I just love the work you're doing. It's so important. We spend a lot of our life in the workplace, so making that a better experience.
Thank you so much. The admiration is mutual. Well, I'd love to just dive right in with you right now and just ask you, what first drew you into this work of social emotional learning and emotional intelligence? Was there a moment that made you realize that these skills really needed to be framed and taught differently?
Yeah, well, what first brought me into it, I can remember my first memory of it being something important when I was 16 in a psychology school in high school. I was a really very shy, introverted kid. And I was in this class and this teacher made some statement. I don't remember exactly, but basically it was like, how you deal with things is up to you. I didn't really think nobody liked me, but I didn't know how to be in the world with people. And so I was like, wait, if that's true, which made sense to me at a huge level, then it was important for me to reframe how I thought of the things coming at me and what I perceived as an attack on me or disregard of me versus my own wisdom of like, well, that's a choice you're making to believe that about them. So then jump forward to college and psychology and going into schools. And the more I learned about key emotional intelligence skills, the more I thought, this is actually how we should operate as humanity. It mattered to me that people were nice to each other. It mattered to me that people were accountable for ourselves and for each other, right? Like, so there was just, I think, a genuine mattered to me. It made sense to me. But then working in schools for decades, I saw the actual application of these skills when they were in place and when they weren't in place. And then it just developed from there. And the second part of your question about how do we teach it differently, frame it differently, I really believe that all of us know the golden rule by the time we're in kindergarten. Do unto others or treat others as you wish to be treated. Like those are just words. And it really doesn't change our behavior. So I think there's a lot of do this, don't do that, PowerPoint bullet points. And then we leave people and say, go do the things I just told you. But none of that is really transitioning into real-time application. So I got really clear early on, lucky in my career, to really experience experiential work where you connect the dots. You connect the concept to the action, to the reflection, which then creates people's why. And so without the experiential piece, I really believe we are just talking at each other in a way that other people can't hear us. And then we're frustrated. And they're frustrated and nothing really changes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is just so true. And it reminds me a lot of the work that we do at Unity & Company. We work a lot with leaders and teams. And, one of the things that we have come to understand, it's the people who are doing the interaction with each other that are doing the learning. It's not our jobs as facilitators to give you all this great knowledge. In fact, if you could just boil it down to three concepts, you can fill a whole day, because it really does take that much time for people to really engage with the concepts, play with them a little bit, communicate with each other and come to their own understanding and belief system around that. So I think that is just so wise. We need real hands-on experience.
with these concepts in order for them really to take root. I'm interested, you mentioned that you had spent decades in education before launching All It Takes and now expanding into workplace training. And so I'm interested in, since you've traveled both of these worlds in education and academia as well as in the professional sphere, how do you see the crossover between what kids needed in schools and then what is lacking in organizations as adults?
Well, we're just a continuation of being human, right? So if we don't get the skills when we're 11 or 16, then we don't have them when we're 24, and then we don't know how to get to work on time, understand why our managers are upset if we're not. Right? Like if we don't get the skills when we're young, and I think the education system's done a disservice to our kids by not prioritizing these skills. We can't just expect somebody to just turn on a light switch one day and then all of a sudden everything they didn't learn, they know how to do. And they know how to make sense out of emotionally in their heart and in their brain. It's like, well, I got away with this for 18 years of my life. Why can't I do it now? And so I think that parenting also has been a piece of it, like this permissive parenting in many ways. At times, like there's a difference between serving and saving. And I think we need to serve our youth so that then they're capable of being productive team players in the workplace. And so the skills that we need to be taught early on and then all the way through. And so that it doesn't change what we need. And I think that our workplaces, in fact, I know, and I bet you do for sure, it's your world, our workplaces are struggling right now because these tools and skills are not being practiced with fidelity.
Well, and I love something that you just said, this difference, drawing a distinction between the difference between serving and saving someone. And I feel like that distinction is not only true in the setting of school and education, but is also true in the workplace. Like a lot of what we work with leaders around is there are an ever-growing concentration of people who would identify as servant leaders, right? And when we work with servant leaders, it is with the best of intentions, but it also is rooted in this idea of sometimes being unable to differentiate between when I am serving somebody and when I am saving somebody and robbing them of actually having opportunities for growth and development. I had a mentor once tell me the most important part of leadership is being willing to allow your direct reports to skin their knee, but not break their leg. And I just thought that was such a powerful analogy that I've carried with me ever since then, right? It's the value of the learning experience that comes from a little bit of pain, right? A little bit of self-expression, a little bit of playing with your own boundaries.
Well, that's where resilience grows, right? When we skin our knee and we get up and we brush it off and we take care of it, but then we move on, we're telling ourselves we're capable of moving on, overcoming. And sometimes we have to learn that harder, like a broken leg is worse than a skinned knee, but most things are recoverable if we have the skills to recover. And that's not about the physical Band-Aid. It's about our inner strength, our emotional aptitude to overcome, to face something straight on, say, I did that. Ouch, let's go. That the ouch doesn't need to be shame or setback. It just needs to be opportunity to move forward.
Yes, absolutely. Like often we treat failure as an end point, but really it can be a strategic enabler if we let it be, if we lean into the development of our own resilience. Love that.
Sure.
The work that you do is named by different terms, and these terms get used in different contexts, right? So we use SEL to kind of describe these competencies in a school-based setting. We use emotional intelligence, or EQ, in the business setting. But at the core, they're really kind of the same. So how do you explain that connection to leaders so it resonates in the workplace?
I think it's really great. People understand in the workplace, typically emotional intelligence. If they want teams that can be accountable to each other, accountable to their outcomes, you want people to get to work on time, you want turnover to be reduced, you want productivity to be increased, you want bottom line to increase. Those skills are emotional intelligence. In schools, I don't even know what the history is on that. It got developed as social emotional literacy, I call it. And social emotional skills are the same. I used to talk to parents all the time when I was in school setting and say like, look, your kids' grades are their paycheck. And when we get older in the workplace, we get a paycheck. The harder we work, typically, the better our outcomes and the more we'll move up a ladder and our paychecks increase, which then our opportunities for the things we love become bigger. And that's typical. And so it's same in the schools, right? Like if you work really hard, your grades come up about effort more than it is about the actual grades because people respect effort, even in the workplace. So the skills are the same. It's just the title that's different. And there's people who don't like the term SEL, but really they still like to know that their kids will be capable of handling an interview. So it's the same skills.
So let's talk a little bit more about SEL. In your book, SEL Muscle Mastery, you introduce a set of muscles that people can strengthen. So I'd love for you to talk us through what these are and really like why you chose the metaphor of muscles.
Okay. Well, let me start there with the metaphor of muscles. So when we think of muscles, you just say the word, most people think of biceps, flex your muscles. We all understand that if we do nothing to move, our muscles will atrophy, even if that feels cringy to say, it's the truth. And so same with our emotional muscles, our mental muscles. So I think of our EQ muscles as ones that we need to practice. We need to flex them. We need to understand when we take a break from them, they're probably going to get less strong. And then we need to practice them some more. And that with practice and flexing, they're going to become more and more reliable. They're going to show up for us in ways that we need them to, especially in the points of challenge, which is the same with our bodies, right? Like if we're somewhat fit, we're going to be able to run from danger. And if we're not fit at all, that's going to be harder. And if we're an athlete, we're going to escape it, right? So it's the same kind of thing I think of with our emotional intelligence skills. And the muscles are pretty practical, everyday communication skills for the most part. In the book, they're called, the first one is Q-tip or quit taking it personal. That's probably the one that most of my audiences in training are like, how do you not take things personal? It is personal. Well, there's some really amazing skill building techniques for learning to not take things personal, and then valuing the reason why we would want to change that behavior for our own good and the relationships we care about. In the workplace, we call Muscle 1 Q-tip resilience building. So the value is building resilience in your teams. The second muscle is power of I, or speaking from I statements, taking accountability. In workplace, we call it ownership. Ownership for what I say, the results of those words, what I do, the results of those words, how I contribute or how I don't. And so that again is a skill base. And the flip side of it is you. As soon as somebody says, well, you, our body language comes forward, there's a little bit of a tone change and it feels just slightly aggressive. And what's the response on the other side? Defensiveness, right? And so without a skill to speak from I and take and be in ownership of what we create, we are not creating trust or respect from our colleagues. We're just not creating it. And then we're complaining that they don't respect us. So looking in the mirror sometimes is a little bit of an ouch, but it can be done through play and fun. The third one is ask versus tell in the book, but in the workplace, we call that collaboration. How do we ask for what we need, speak in I, not take things personally, with an intention to develop communication that moves everyone forward in positive ways? Again, as a manager in a workplace, when your team is working cohesively together, your bottom line and your productivity go up. Period. When people are not trying to undermine each other, but trying to lift each other, it's just a better thing. And that doesn't matter if we're in schools, we're in a teacher lounge, or we're in a corporate boardroom. Those things matter. So connection in the workplace is skill 4, which is storytelling, telling stories, talking from authenticity, talking from vulnerability. That doesn't mean telling your life story. People get that all weird. Like, no, you don't have to tell every detail of your life story to be authentically connecting to another person. If you've had a really rough night and you're coming in a little more cranky than normal, and you just say, not my best morning, I'm asking for 5 extra minutes of just kind of leave me alone, and I'm going to reset and re-engage. So being able to do that, that's vulnerable, but it isn't sharing, our our life stories, which people somehow think happens. 5 is curiosity, which in the workplace we call agility. Agility means our ability to not judge, but to stay curious, to stay inquisitive, and to offer benefit of the doubt that something more is happening or there's more to learn, more to know. And when we stay in that space of an inquisition and curiosity, we actually, again, receive respect from other people because you want to know about me. You want to know where my head was, and that matters to people. But somehow we do that less than judgment. Judging is what we do in everyday practice. And I'd love to see that switched where the everyday practice is curiosity and the anomaly is judgment. What would we have in the workplace if we had that? And the final one from the workplace lens is integrity, which in SEL in the book I call walk the talk. It is being, doing, saying the kinds of words, the kinds of attitudes, the kinds of moods that we expect from other people. And sometimes that can be really tough for managers especially. But everyone really, like colleagues on a team, well, I expect you to show up on time, but I'm late, but I have an excuse that's a good excuse for me, but your excuse isn't good enough for you. How often do we have stories like that? Mm-hmm. So those are the 6 muscles.
I love that framework, Lori, for a couple of reasons. One of the things that I reflected on as you were going through the 6 muscles is just how often those exact attributes are the ones that get purposefully deprioritized when leaders perceive that they are in crunch mode or that they're in a fire drill or that they're in a really kind of anomalous time in the company's history where things are super important and where we have limited resources, limited time, and we really need to get this over the line because there's a high level of urgency or risk involved. And one of the things that we know to be true about business in today's day and age is we have gotten so good at squeezing more and more productivity out of the system. But like what that means is that the way that the workplace feels more and more often is that we are overloaded, that we're in this crunch time scenario. And if these competencies, if these behaviors are getting deprioritized, every time there is a fire drill kind of scenario. And if fire drills are becoming more and more prominent as a percentage of the scenarios that you're likely to encounter at work, and if these skills are actually muscles that will atrophy and die if you do not use them and work them out consistently, you can see how there's like a vicious cycle where organizations don't invest in this work. They strategically deprioritize it when things feel a little bit too intense for them to approach things with much intentionality, but then that creates conflict and a lack of collaboration and a lack of innovation, a lack of communication, which leads to less productivity and increased errors, which creates, potentially more problems like down the line where you're going to feel yourself in a fire drill scenario trying to clean up the pieces of that mess, right? So I
rehire from turnover or right? Like
absolutely. Yeah. And so it's like, it is really to the detriment of organizations that leaders do not really invest and prioritize this work, the organizations that don't feel like they can justify it. On the flip side, we've worked with organizations to where this is just part of their values. They live in integrity with these values. These are the leadership principles that they expect from their leaders and the way that they show up, regardless of scenario, regardless of circumstance. And the companies that really do invest in that view of leadership are the ones that they still have their problems, they still have their fire drills, but they navigate those things with a lot more consistency and they're able to perform year after year because of their continued investment in their people and not the problems that they're experiencing from an operational perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And then the bottom line is just exactly the opposite of what we want if you're a company. A quick example right now, we're going into our busiest month of the year, and I'm looking at my team knowing that they're going to have to do more than what they usually do. And it might mean more hours. And I'm like, we're talking about it ahead of time. I brought it to them. I said, listen, what we're going to need is this is where the salary thing comes in, and we're going to just need more. And it might be bigger than a 40-hour week for the next 5 weeks. And we all know that. But instead of just expecting it, I did name it. And sometimes you can't change the actual thing that's happening. We have an amazing amount of work coming up, which is a great thing. And it's going to be a lot on my team. I know that. So just naming it out loud, saying that you see what the impact will be for them, that, we've got this, and on the other side, we're going to make it up, and it's not going to just be like a free week off, but we're going to make it be better. And we have to be really good about using these skills ourselves. If you get into a place where you're trying to say yes to everything and you really can't get it done, we're here for each other. So it's a conversation that we're having right now. And I wish that more people would just preempt the things they see coming, because just that can be just a settlement on somebody's heart to go, oh, I'm seen, I'm heard, we're in it together. The boss sees that. Whew, it's going to be a lot, but we got this.
Yes. I mean, how important is that? And I think it's just investing in that communication, like the level of support and empathy that you feel from that. And also the acknowledgement that this is a temporal thing, right? Like what I found working with teams is it's not the hard work that kills the team vibe. It is the lack of visibility into, will there ever be a reprieve? Is my contribution appreciated and respected? Or is it just something that the organization feels entitled to and expects? And laboring under that assumption that my contributions aren't valued, that it's going to be this intense forever, that there's never going to be time for rest, reprieve, or reflection, that can get people to be fatigued before they even start. And
bitter and resentful.
Yes, exactly. 100%. Having these conversations, having a leader that will come up to you and say, hey, listen, this is a point in time thing. It's going to be a gnarly few weeks. I'm probably going to need more than 40 hours from you, but I'm so grateful for the work that you're putting in. Look at all this work that we have coming up. You guys are a huge part of that. You can turn an event where you're delivering quote unquote bad news and have it be hugely empowering and an accelerator for team performance rather than a detractor from it.
Yeah. I just think that it doesn't get done enough in schools and classrooms. It doesn't get done enough in schools and staff rooms, and it doesn't get done enough on, teams or in corporate boardrooms. We just are not giving ourselves or each other often enough the grace for the human piece of being in the workplace, which again, I think the workplace is a classroom also, but
yeah. It's not like we stopped learning after we graduated high school or college, right? So much learning is done on the job. Why do you think that is, Lori? I'd like to just take a little detour. I think that one of the things that is so interesting to me is that the science of the benefits of really just understanding each other's humanity and engaging with each other with that being top of mind. That's basically what we're talking about. The science it's not something that you can really argue with. Researcher after researcher in every corner of the globe has done this work and come up with similar conclusions. And yet it still feels like in large institutional settings, like in academia and education, as well as in organizations, the first thing that people do is move to basically deny their own humanity, deny their emotions, to label them as liabilities. You'll even hear executives say, we don't make decisions based off of emotion in this workplace. We're a very data-forward organization. We're very objective, as if emotions do not help to inform the way that we think about things or color the lens through which we see things. And so I'm just wondering, from your experience, since you also work in this world, why do you think it is that emotions are so central to unlocking what is great about human beings, and yet they are the thing that we seem to deny ourselves the recognition of the most consistently, a number of different settings?
I think the biggest resistance is its change, and it's not how we're raised. I think that our society in general in the United States, and there's some other countries and a lot of studies. I mean, you're speaking research, and I often say, bring me any research that says this stuff is not important as a priority, and I'm happy to read it, to talk about it, along with the massive piles of research that I read that speaks to its critical importance. Not even it's I should do that. No, it is a critical, important thing. So I think people are afraid of it. I think that there's a lot of fear around what it would be like if I felt something. And so we bury it, we block it. And I think it starts really young. I think we're a society of blame and shame and judgment, right? So even if you are a person who feels more emotive, then you're in a society that kind of shuts that down or shames you for it. And so we don't grow up knowing how to do it, which is why I think the education system is not supporting our kids in a way that prepares them for the workforce of this century. I just think they're not. And they're my people, right? I believe in education and the public education, and I still think it's a very significantly weak spot. And I think that when you get into the pressure of results, so a CEO downline to their managers and supervisors is all about bottom line, which is just like the education system's all about test scores. It's the same. Like we're just looking at a moving spiral into different terms, but it's really the same behaviors. And so when you make the bottom line the most critical thing and you don't give the skills nor the value to the human component that creates the outcome of the bottom line, then we're missing an opportunity to keep people, like your workplace therapy, right? Keep people healthy, keep them happy. I consider happiness as being part of healthiness. Like people aren't going to be happy if they're not feeling healthy. And I feel that in physical, mental, emotional, right? And then behaviors aren't going to be what we want them to be. And we might be able to really strong arm the results that we want, but we cannot strong arm humans into happiness. And ultimately, the bottom line is going to be a really derailed team. It's going to be a team that lacks enthusiasm. It's going to be a team that lacks any purpose. And over time, that's why people quit. And our current younger generations are quitting faster because they're like, I'm not doing this. I want to be valued. And then employers, I mean, that's a whole different thing when you talk about that. But I really just think we're afraid of emotions. Bottom line, that's the biggest one.
Yeah, I see that a lot in my work too. And I feel like I might be opining on things that I'm not well qualified to talk about. But like one of the things, like you've been in education for a long time, and I think it's well known that our educational system is kind of built out of the outcropping of the industrial age, right? Which is really what enabled us as humanity to be able to really exponentially increase our productivity by treating things as essentially assembly lines with low variability, like just trying to create and clone like certain conditions and standardize things across the board. And I think like one of the things that's interesting about emotional intelligence is it's kind of the opposite of that. It's like the opposite of standardization and codification. And instead, what it represents is that we as humans are beautifully unique, right? And highly variable. And the way to tap into motivation for each of us is somewhat custom and specific to who we are as individuals and who it is that we're interacting with on the other side of the fence, and whether or not that person is self-aware enough to bring the best out of us. And so I think there's almost like an allergy. Our minds as organizational leaders are all about standardization and productivity and tooling the machine to maximize output. And we're failing to engage the part of our brain that knows inherently that like we as humans have more nuanced needs than just a set of instructions that we need to execute blindly and mindlessly. And I feel like that's just going to be more and more pronounced as an issue as we move forward, because a lot of the standardized codified processes that we used to do as humans have been outsourced to machines or AI. And like all that's left for us as humans to really play in terms of our playground at work is this messier stuff that involves emotional literacy, that involves creative thinking. It involves collaboration and innovation and teamwork in order to bring forward. That's where the future of organizational productivity lies, not in your ability to basically reduce everybody on your team to the lowest common denominator, like absolutely, and leave their emotional needs unmet.
Yep. And we see that in turnover, right? Or even job changes. Like when my dad when he grew up, and my grandparents, they all stayed in the same career for 40 years. They just did the same thing. People don't do that anymore. People, right. I mean, and not nobody, but the general population, the more of the masses are changing jobs, changing careers, changing interests. exploring interests and are unhappy when they're unable to explore. So what could happen if in the workplace, even in yours right now, our own workplaces, we could say, let's explore right here. I don't want to lose you. So let's take that need for exploration and growth that you're interested in, and let's learn from it and grow us as an organization and you as a person, and maybe here with us, because replacing people and retraining people costs a lot of money.
Tons. Absolutely. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty a little bit. So one of the frameworks that you mentioned in your book is notice, choose, act. And I'd love for you to break that down. So can you explain to us how this works and maybe share an example of how a leader can use it in like these high stress situations that we encounter?
Sure, absolutely. So notice, choose, act is, other words for it is awareness, intention, and results. Like those three, I call it notice, choose, act, but really noticing is awareness, choosing is intention, and action are results. And noticing is where we have gaps, right? Usually we use this, you can use it to celebrate too, but typically this gets to be a problem-solving framework. And it's what entrepreneurs use when they see a gap, like they create something because they notice something in the world that's missing and they have this ingenious idea for it. A manager might notice that their team has way too much absenteeism and it's affecting productivity, etc. And then so in the framework under each of the first two, we also explore this from the human dynamic piece. So let's say an employer becomes aware that they have a lot of absenteeism and turnover. That's just people not in their jobs getting there. And so they have a conversation either amongst themselves or even better with their team, with the framework. Like we notice that we have an absentee issue. How we feel about that. Now, not the you are doing, it's a we notice, and how we feel about it is nervous about our own jobs, nervous about your jobs. We feel anxiety, we feel frustration, we feel angry. That is how we feel every day when we come in, and one or two of the 10 who are supposed to be here every day are not here for whatever reason. And then what behaviors follow those feelings? Because I believe that behaviors follow feelings, but we're not paying attention to that. So when you're anxious, frustrated, angry, feeling disrespected, when those are the feelings you have, what behaviors that are human follow that? And when you have your team fill this in, you don't have to do it on paper, but you can also do it in conversation. Usually behaviors that follow those feelings are, I'm really cranky, I'm short-tempered, I'm more stingy with my time and my resources. I'm less generous. Those are behaviors. Well, who wants to work in that environment, right? And so all of a sudden you see a spiral. People start being more absent more often because they're coming into work into those behaviors and those feelings. And so you're really actually just perpetuating the problem. So then we think, okay, what do we want instead? Which is choose, which is intention. Well, we want to have fidelity to attendance, right? We want people to be here on time. We want them to come to work. And how would we feel if that was happening? We would probably feel respected. We'd feel accomplished. We would feel productive. Those are things we would be feeling. And what behaviors follow those feelings? When I'm feeling that, I'm going to be generous with my time. I'm going to be humorous, right? Like, what is my behavior going to be? It's going to be open to you. It's going to be more conversational. I'm not going to be restrictive, right? I'm going to be open. So then you just have that conversation. Where do we want to live? Do we want to be over here where we are, or do we want to be over here, which I, as a manager, did not identify for you? I had a conversation with you, and we all filled these things in. So who wants to be there? And from that place, we can design results. We can design actions, which is that are concretely measurable towards creating the intention. Now, one of the things that I like to say that I think is really important is a lot of people think choose is the action and the results, and they want to measure against intention. One way to kind of land this is think about New Year's resolutions. How many of us have made them? How many of us have stopped making them? Because at the end of the year, we didn't accomplish them. We feel bad about ourselves. We blame everything else. But ultimately, we're like, yeah, those are just not worth doing. Because New Year's resolutions are intentions. And intention without action is fantasy. In the action column of the framework, it's like, okay, so if we say we want to have these behaviors that match these feelings to create this result, these are the actions that each of us can agree to. So when we do this with people, we get every person in our training, whether they're 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 50-year-olds, to say, my action personally towards creating this intention will be this. And then when you do that as a group, you get accountability. You have each other being each other's champions. It's not about gotcha, you didn't do it. It's about, hey, it didn't, when we put on our emotional intelligence skills, it's, hey, this didn't go well for you today. What do you need from me to help you get to that? Because we all decided together that these are the things we're going to do. And so there becomes a beautiful collaboration when we're understanding what we need to do for impact in our job, which is productivity, and what we need as humans, which is emotional support.
Yes. Well, and I love about that example. I mean, love the framework because I think it's something that leaders can take and apply immediately. It's something readily understandable for that. The thing that I really do love is you mentioned curiosity versus judgment, right? And how the world just needs more curiosity in general. And so I love how this framework really enables and encourages people to engage their people with curiosity, because how often, like in the example of unacceptable and absenteeism on a team, right? I think what's very common and the way our 90+% of workplaces are handling this problem is just to reinforce the attendance policy. Like write people up, right? Give you a verbal warning, give you a written warning, right? And just like guide people through progressive discipline versus asking a single question whatsoever, right? And so I love how many questions are built into this framework in the system, because I think that right there is a big part of connection. Like how much more respected and valued would you feel if you weren't just, carrying around this judgment of like, oh, you've been unacceptably late or absent so many times, and flipping the script and saying, hey, what's going on for you that is causing this? How are you feeling about things? What is your individualized commitment to, if our goal as a group is to reduce absenteeism, what can you contribute to that solution? Yeah. There's so much more agency. There's so much more co-creation. There's so much more humanity in that equation, which is why I ultimately think it works.
It's the serving, right? Not saving and not oppressing. Yes. So I think that you've got some teams that save, right? And then some that oppress. And somewhere in the middle is how we serve people to be good for themselves and good for our teams and good for our outcomes that we, desire.
So what are some of the most common barriers that you see to teams or leaders developing these SEL muscles? What holds them back?
I think the biggest one I see most often is a story around time. I don't have time for this. These are the soft skills. No, to me, these are the critical skills. These are the skills that actually develop the tools for you to have everything you want as a manager or business owner. I think the excuse of time, we don't have time, we're under this, we're under that. It took me 3 minutes to have a conversation the other day, acknowledging what was coming up and naming the pressure that my team was going to face over the next 6 weeks. It didn't take a lot of time, but it probably saved hours of time, hours of productivity, hours of people feeling like they can do it rather than ruminating on, oh my gosh, there's so much. And when we're in that headspace, we're not being productive, right? We're getting nothing done. We're scrolling on our phone when no one's looking because we're like either doom scrolling or we're Facebook, or we're escaping from what is in front of us because it feels too big. So the time invested into training our teams on these skills, into bringing play and interaction and the recognition of humanity, the time invested, the other side of that is way larger time invested into what productivity looks like.
100%. Oh, such a powerful message. I do want to kind of approach this from a different angle, though, because you've said that what we're seeing in the workplace and in schools reflects a broader societal gap in resilience and connection. How do you see SEL and emotional intelligence addressing that bigger human challenge?
Well, I think there's just no way not to name, our societal wedges right now, right? Like our society in the United States is very polarized. And I think that all of this leads to what we're seeing. We haven't done a good job raising adults. Every child, we're raising an adult. That to me, that's how I see parenting. That's our job, is to raise an adult. And where the schools, maybe parenting, society at large, has not developed the tools to say, I'm hurting, and that doesn't give me permission to hurt back. It gives me permission to name it, to investigate, solution-focused therapy, solution-focused teams. When we're hurting, it's important to notice it and then notice that we can get better and feel better, but we don't have to do that by hurting somebody else. Because ultimately, when we hurt somebody else, when we're hurting, we just hurt more. And people who want to deny that that's true, bring me some research. I had a superintendent ask me, and so she's a leader of a district. And she asked me in 2021, when we're coming out of the pandemic, she's like, what do you do with people who just say, I won't change? And when you have, very little sense of ability to impact your teams, you can't make them do anything and you feel powerless. My answer to her was like, how is that an okay thing to not move with what the science says? If you get sick or someone on your team gets sick, they don't want somebody trained in 2010 medical to treat them. They want somebody trained in 2025 research to help them feel better or get better or overcome a really terrible illness. I really find it challenging. And I think we have to be brave enough to ask our managers that, and our societies and our church leaders and our leadership, like, how is it okay to treat people with knowledge we had 30, 40, 50 years ago, when what we have in front of us is very new science? And some people don't want that question. They don't want to answer that. But there are a lot of people, when I ask that question, who are like, whoa, especially when you make the analogy with the medical.
Yes.
Right? Like, I don't want somebody to treat my mom if she's ill, or myself or my husband, or with any kind of antiquated research. So how are we like going, oh, well, that's okay in that one, but not over here? And then that becomes the integrity thing, muscle 6, walk the talk. Like, really, we have to decide who we are as people, and then decide who we want to be as people, because sometimes a lot of us are off track a little, and maybe what we're saying and doing doesn't feel good to us, and we know it doesn't feel good to our teams, but I don't know how to do it different. Well, there's answers. Your company's answers, right? What we're doing is answers. And we have to invest in ways forward, because I think society is the lens for what we're seeing in schools and workplaces.
Yes. Well, I love that example about who would you go to if yourself or somebody close to you needed to be treated for, an underlying medical condition. One of the things that popped into my mind as you were sharing that brilliant analogy is just how organizational leaders are also kind of turning a blind eye to how they're prioritizing bleeding edge research within their organizations. I mean, I've worked for a lot of tech companies, and I'd be hard pressed to find any head of engineering out there that would say, oh, it's actually okay for us not to conform to the latest coding standards. It's actually okay for us to not conform to the latest manufacturing standards or to the latest, like in every discipline within an organization, the expectation is that for you to prove your value and your worth, you are going to be at the bleeding edge of research and science in your area of discipline. And yet for executives, their area of discipline is how do we get this boat to row in the same direction, right? It is the people that are doing the rowing. And like, there's literally like, we are not lacking for research or insight into how to approach the job of leading people. And yet, for some reason, too many organizations have not added that to their top priority list in the same way that they have innovation across all of their sectors of their business. And I think like that's a story that we need to change, because I do think that it's not only better, as you've said, for the individuals, like the employees doing the work, but organizationally, there are better outcomes to be had as well if leaders consistently engage in this work. I have one final question for you. We've talked at length just about emotional intelligence and SEL, in the workplace and other applications, and the benefits that it drives as well as the risks and consequences that it mitigates. And so there are probably a lot of leaders listening now that are really excited to do something with the information that you've just shared with them. So for leaders who are listening and they want to strengthen SEL and emotional intelligence in their own teams, what's one or two practical steps that they can start taking right away?
I think one of the biggest ones is to face their own mirror and look at where their barriers are. Don't have to share that with anybody, but when we actually realize that we're uncomfortable leading a true conversation and opening in a staff meeting or a productive production meeting or whatever, opening it first with, hey, how is everyone? Or we're going to do an activity and it's not going to be cheesy. It's going to be important and it's going to help us understand each other. First, we have to look at our willingness or unwillingness and our why to do those things. That's the first thing. And that's probably the hardest step. And then the next step is being willing to go 2 steps further than we want to or we believe we can go. The research says it and we respect research. If the science says it, if our colleagues say it, if all indicators say, I can be a wise person on this team who brings this team along, then I need to go further. And we call it 2 steps. 2 steps further than you want to go or believe you can go. Because once you start the momentum, people will feel your authentic attempt. They will meet you where you are, and then you will meet them where they are. And suddenly you enjoy each other again. And that doesn't mean friendships and dinners and all that you're in the workplace. But it does mean when I come into work and I say good morning and you say good morning back, I know you mean it because I meant it. And just that little tiny 1-second thing of a genuine good morning can change someone's day and change their outcome. I think that the first thing to do is look at yourself and look where your barriers are and then give it a try. Take one activity you can find online. You could find it through you, Scott. You could find it through us. Like some activity that is playful, that is genuine, that has a reflective practice around it, that just says, where are we at today? Where are we at today? What do we need today? And mean it, because so many questions come out of our mouths and right behind it, we answer it ourselves. And our teams are like, you didn't really ask me a question you care about. So that's where I think we have to start. And that, again, we have to start there because it's the hardest place to start. Because once the 2 steps forward gets momentum, then we see the results. We have a better time. We enjoy coming to work, and the rest becomes history.
Yes. I would venture to guess that all of our listeners, as well as myself included, would love to come into a workplace where that's the vibe on a consistent basis. So if we do have leaders out in the audience, and I imagine that there will be quite a few of them who are listening to the things that we've talked about today and are interested in bringing this to their own workplace, and they want to work with you and your team. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
The fastest way would be to go to allittakes.org/workplace. I'll get you straight to our workplace information. And then for the book, it's selmuscles.com. But for your listeners, Scott, I think that allittakes.org/workplace will give you what you're looking for.
Fantastic. Awesome. And we'll go ahead and put that link as well as a link to your book in the show notes. Lori, thank you just so much for being here and sharing your expertise and your work with us. And for our listeners today, thank you all for tuning in for our enlightening conversation today with Lori Woodley Langendorff. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. It really does help us to get the word out. And if you're interested in working with Unity & Company, just drop us a line at info@unityandcompany.com. We'll catch you all next time.